Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us a very special episode in the 80s sitcom kind of sense, because my guest today is Eliza Bleu, and we're going to talk about something really, really serious, which is human trafficking and how it is still a thing on social media and in our culture. And Eliza, being an activist and survivor of human trafficking, her campaign to do what she can to fight this stuff. And Eliza, you know, I follow you on my locals. You post about this stuff a lot. This is obviously as intense as it gets. One of the things that, for people who aren't familiar with the term, you know, human trafficking, there was that law that was recently passed, and as a result, you saw things like Craigslist and RentMen getting shut down. But that's not what you're talking about. You're not talking about people who are like adult sex workers. Can you describe what you mean by human trafficking, and how big of an effect is it in our culture and internationally?
Yes. Well, I wanted to congratulate you on your book.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, can we just talk? I mean, okay. Look, I know the topic's very serious, but let's talk about can we please talk about how awesome your book is doing for a second?
No, we're talking about human trafficking.
Okay. So, so I have no problem with willing, we're talking about the book before this is over. So I have no problem with willing adult sex workers or willing adult entertainers. So when I talk about human trafficking, I'm talking about forced fraud or coercion for the sale of labor, sex, black market human organs, child soldiers, forced child begging, and illegal adoption, and in some cases illegal child marriage. Not all child marriage, unfortunately, is illegal or considered human trafficking, and the list goes on and on. So when we talk about human trafficking, it's a very broad, extremely nuanced crime. In my particular case, I am a survivor. I was trafficked domestically here in the United States. And I'm a United States citizen. So that's it was sex trafficking in my particular case. And so I don't have any problem with willing adult sex workers. I don't have a problem with willing adult entertainers. Unfortunately, sometimes the conversations get a little muddied. So I try to separate them as much as possible. What I like to focus on for the most part is child sexual abuse material, particularly on our social media platforms.
Yeah, one of the things that I saw, and I would love you to go into this at some length, is Jack Dorsey had been following you. And
Still does.
Yeah, and you were complaining, you were pointing out account after account that was posting child pornography. We're not talking about someone making some joke or lewd comment about children. We're talking about full-blown child pornography. You are bringing this to Twitter's attention, and they not only didn't care, I think in some cases you were the one who got in trouble, or other people have gotten their accounts locked for complaining about it. This seems completely incomprehensible to me, because even 4chan, my buddy Jay is a mod at 4chan. The one thing 4chan will ban is CP, is child pornography. So even they are like, okay, this is a line we're not crossing. That makes no sense to me. So can you please explain?
Yeah, so just to be really, really clear, and I apologize to anyone that's listening, this is going to get kind of dark and graphic, but just so that we're crystal clear, we are talking about young children under the age of 18 being sexually exploited. So that either means that they're groomed by a predator to send their own sexual exploitation. In some cases, we see children exploiting themselves by selling their own child sexual abuse material. And in the most egregious of cases, it is adults sexually abusing children. We're talking about anything from little babies to toddlers. So this is the type of material that's on Twitter. Now, when I say on Twitter, I'm not talking a small number. It's over 65,000 child sexual abuse material images and videos was reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in 2020 alone. So that's over 65,000 to the National Center. So we're at an epic crisis. Jack does follow me. And that conversation is really interesting. I was trafficked on Twitter as well. So there's been 3 profiles to my knowledge that my former abusers made to traffic me on Twitter. I didn't realize because I kind of just signed up for Twitter in late 2019. So it was like one of the last few days of 2019, I signed up for Twitter.
But what does that mean that they trafficked you on Twitter? How can someone traffic you if they're not in contact with you?
Yeah, so the way that was working, I didn't know about the profiles existing because I wasn't on Twitter and I wasn't looking for them. The way that my former abusers were doing it is that it was going back to my Instagram. The Twitter accounts were linking back to my Instagram, and they were trafficking me off Instagram, Backpage, sugar daddy websites. I mean, whatever type of internet trafficking is what was happening. I'll go into more detail. So it looks like a profile. In my particular case, the profiles look like profiles that would be me, but trying to entice business to sell me, bringing it back to my Instagram where they were doing business. Fortunately, in my particular case, there are no nude images or videos of me on Twitter. Thank God, right now. The day is young, I guess. But it would go back to my Instagram, and that's how they would traffic me, sell me without my full consent and without my knowledge. When I joined Twitter, an ex-boyfriend actually pointed out the first profile. After I reported it to Twitter, it took them 3.5 months to take it down. The second profile took 5 days. They actually took it while I was on my way to they took it down while I was on my way to do my interview with Tim Cast. And then the third profile, the platform has refused to take down.
Okay, so I don't understand. So someone creates a fake profile of you. There's photographs of you. How are they monetizing this? How is Twitter getting a cut? Like what's literally happening?
Yes. So Twitter cut off all of our Twitters based off advertising sales and data sales. So any profile that's on Twitter, they get a cut of it. So they can say to Pepsi, Coca-Cola, whomever they're doing business with, we have this many active users on our platform. So in essence, you and I are definitely making them money. When it's a free platform, we are the product.
But how are these people who are using your images making money themselves?
So, it would depend. So my trafficking situation is going to be a little bit different than what we're going to talk about with the children. So in my particular case, they're impersonation profiles that would have led back to them selling me to do business. So they would lure somebody in with the profile, like, oh, this is a pretty girl, blah, blah, blah. Because I mean, it's been a while that I've had the opportunity to be free. So it's not like it's still happening.
Sure, right.
But they would lure somebody in, direct the business back to, I'm assuming, either a dating profile or, kind of like when you see folks saying, oh, click this for my nudes or whatever, they would send them back to my Instagram or other profiles, platforms, I guess, who knows? Because I can't see inside the DMs. So I don't know what's going inside on the DMs on the back end. But I have been able with an organization to sort of track some of the use of these profiles and some of the communication back with other profiles, and it's really scary. So it would be someone that they would contact to do some type of business and then take it somewhere else. Now, what does scare me about those profiles still being active is that my abusers are still free. So they could be using my image to contact survivors that are already more vulnerable, of course, for trafficking or abuse. They could be using those profiles to traffic other women. That's the truth. They didn't stop. So when they lost me, they didn't stop.
So this is a kind of identity theft kind of situation, but instead of getting a credit card in your name, they're basically saying, I'm you. I'm also known as this. Come talk to me. Or in the alternative, instead of being some kind of vague positive thing, like I'm going to be your friend, it's that you want to see sexy pictures of me, come join this site. And you're basically being an unpaid spokeswoman for whatever nefarious organization or person this is.
I found there was a website. Actually, maybe I shouldn't talk about it. I'll probably leave that out. But yeah, there's a lot of things that go on. And now more than ever, I am terrified because survivors are already vulnerable because they've already been trafficked, that they are using my name and likeness to contact our most vulnerable. Especially, they could say, hey, I'm on this, I've been on these shows. Oh, and then, get the victim or survivor to trust them and then say, oh, come out and live with me, especially minors, because minors fall prey to this really easily. So it is imperative. And of course, I'm not complaining at all, but I'm not verified on Twitter. So it would be difficult for someone to differentiate between an impersonation profile or a profile that was trafficking. So when they were trafficking me, they would have tried to get business that way. Now there's no way to get business unless they're using it for some other type of business. My thing with Twitter was they weren't taking it down. Even when I would contact them, even when I still contact them, they don't take down the profiles. The difference between myself and the minors. So when I went to a national organization, I said, hey, I'm being trafficked on Twitter, because nobody could help me. I went to the police department. I went all over the place. And I'm pretty knowledgeable in this space. So if I couldn't figure out how to get help, and Jack Dorsey follows me on Twitter, and we've had a very nice relationship. Up until this point, we had I would call it very nice relationship. He was someone that I looked up to because of what he's built in multiple ways. And I also am pretty naive sometimes. I didn't know who I was dealing with or what I was dealing with. So when I reached out to a national organization to try to help me to contact Twitter and to try to do something about these impersonation trafficking profiles, then they told me about John Doe. John Doe is the first survivor that's suing Twitter. So sorry, that's a lot of information.
No, that's fine. So tell me.
It's a lot. It's really intense, isn't it?
Well, of course it is. But I mean, I think just like with North Korea and other stuff, people need to be able to kind of get it doled out piecemeal, because the whole totality is so removed from our normal experience that it's kind of hard for people to wrap their heads around it. So what I wanted to ask you about is, like, can you discuss a bit about this? It seems unbelievable to most people that you can go on Twitter and see like lewd and nude pictures of children. This just is something I think most of us would regard as a literal impossibility. And there was a New York Times article not that long ago that someone brought to my attention, which just kind of completely floored me, where they have, I think it was the FBI, had an organization dedicated to fighting like child pornography.
Yes.
And they didn't have enough people to even deal with the infants who were being filmed.
So if you're talking about so there's been multiple series done by Gabriel Dance and Michael Keller from the New York Times. By far, and I'm not a huge fan of the Cathedral, but by far the most extensive and thorough journalism around this area that I've ever seen. So people like to say, oh, I don't believe it's happening. Oh, I don't believe it's happening. It's happening. It's in the New York Times. It's widely reported on, not even just by the New York Times. But so the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is sort of the clearinghouse for all of the child sexual abuse material. At the time when those Gabriel Dance and Michael Keller pieces came out, the numbers were lower. Now we're looking at 65 million reported child sexual abuse material, images and videos in 2020 to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The FBI and the Los Angeles Police Department both told Gabriel Dance and Michael Keller from the New York Times that they were so overwhelmed that they could not handle anyone over a toddler, being sexually exploited. They're too overwhelmed.
But I mean, there's something very disturbing to that, because if someone is trying to be a predator in this space, they are now being told in writing, basically, you're going to be able to get away with it because we don't have the resources to deal with you. There
are some, so John Doe 1 and John Doe 2 from Twitter are a perfect example. They were both 13 years old in the video. Their child sexual exploitation was watched over 160,000 times, and it was retweeted over 2,000 times. That video, because they were both 13 years old in the video, would not have popped up as like a high priority. And it also wasn't already in the system. So one of the things that's so difficult when we're talking about this issue is that the child sexual abuse material already has to be in the system for in the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's system for it to pop up on the current technology that Twitter, Facebook, Pornhub, Tumblr, Reddit, Google are using. Does that make sense?
So is there like kind of like a reverse image search? So like if you just flag this image, the algorithm right away, as soon as it pops up, knows to delete it and clear it.
Exactly. But the difficulty is that, so that's Microsoft Photo DNA. It was created in 2009. And I've had the honor and privilege to get to become friendly with the Berkeley professor that designed the platform. And I've had an opportunity to meet with him, and he's taught me so much. And there is technology that exists that's way more upgraded. The difficulty is getting these platforms to use it. They're not using it. And that's also a terrifying fact as well. There's better technology now.
So can you describe what this lawsuit is and what the basis for it is?
Yeah. So the lawsuit, so first and foremost, I just always like to remind people, so Facebook's getting sued by 3 minor survivors of human trafficking. Reddit's being sued by 1 minor survivor of human trafficking. Pornhub's being multiple class action lawsuits with very young children suing. And then Twitter.
Wait,
right
what do you
now,
mean by very young? Because what do you mean by very young in this context?
Young, prepubescent.
Oh my God. Okay.
And then in the case of John Doe 1 and John Doe 2, it's 2 minor male survivors suing Twitter. They filed the lawsuit. So in my particular case, so there's one kind of good thing is that in 2018, there was a Section 230 amendment signed into law called FOSTA SESTA. That is what the young men are using. Unfortunately, in my case, so when we go back and talk a little bit about my case, because it's not so explicit on Twitter, I would have a more difficult time suing Twitter. But after I learned about John Doe 1 and now John Doe 2's case, my sort of own story sort of took a back seat. You know, I was kind of like, whoa, this is a thing. Okay. They're suing. Twitter's already tried to dismiss both minors' lawsuits, claiming Section 230 protection.
So that's the thing that a lot of conservatives are upset about, which is basically by classifying Twitter as not a publisher, as not having control over its editorial, they're basically just a platform that they cannot be held liable for anything that is posted within the site itself.
Which is against the law. I mean, there's something else too here, and this is probably one of the most important pieces of the story, is that when John Doe 1, a minor at the time, provided Twitter with government photo ID as part of a report, Twitter reviewed the material and said, after review, we've decided not to take it down.
Hey, really happy to promote Fume, F-U-M. It's an alternative to vaping and smoking. Here's how it works. If you go to breathefume.com, breathe has an E at the end, you illiterates, and use code Malice10, you get 10% off your order. What Fume is, it's a wooden inhaler. It's basically like a wooden tube, no electronics, and they have these cores, they're kind of like these styrofoamy things, that are filled with the benefits of super plants. So they've got a bubbly lime one for energy. They've got one called Conquer for kicking nicotine cravings. It's got black pepper, peppermint, and eucalyptus, some other stuff. They've got a new one called Lemon Berry Bliss, lemon, lavender, and peppermint for allergy symptom relief. The point is, if you're a smoker, if you're a vapor or vapist, you don't know what to do with your hands, and that habit can help cause people to kind of relapse. Fume gets around it. Plus, it looks really cool. Looks like a steampunk vape. So if you go to breathefume.com and use code Malice10, you get 10% off your order, and you get to save money and stop that filthy habit. Speaking of filthy habits, let's get back to my terrible show.
So how graphic is this imagery that we're talking about that they refuse to take down?
Two 13-year-old boys being sexually exploited. I mean, it wouldn't matter if it was a still picture of someone standing in front of, I mean, there's no reason that I haven't seen the video. Look,
okay,
I don't try
so
to
video.
Yes, it was a video. It was watched over 160,000 times, Malice, on Twitter. Right up on there. I mean, I haven't seen the video. There's no reason for me as a survivor to be viewing child sexual abuse material. A lot of people think that I go looking for it on Twitter. It is actually the opposite. I yell at people if they alert me to it, because for a few reasons, it's reporting it takes a lot of time. Reporting just takes forever. And then, not that I wouldn't. I mean, if I come across child sexual abuse material, I have to, by law, report it. But it's very triggering. I mean, and I don't use that word lightly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was thinking about doing a book about this, and my agent's like, this is way too radioactive. And then I had friends of mine point out, they're like, do you really want to start doing this research? Because first of all, like, I don't want to see, and at the same time, it's kind of like, well, if someone has to look at this and report it and kind of expose it, and it's really easy for you to look the other way when there's people who are victims, just like with the North Korean situation. But someone else said, you start Googling around, you're going to get flagged. And then this whole, like, what was it, that musician's from England? Oh, I'm just doing research, whoever's Pete Townsend or whatever. That's not going to fly either. So, I kind of dropped the topic, but this is something that is something that, matters to me intensely, as you know, and as some other people might know. I was on Rogan a couple of times ago, and a buddy of mine had come out as being the victim of child sexual abuse. And what I had, why I felt it was important for me to talk about the issue on Rogan with his permission is because I thought it was really just completely unjust that he has to grow up and keep his mouth shut because it's going to upset people's sensibilities. They won't know how to react. And that's something that has to stop. People need to be able to discuss it.
The time for that is over.
Yeah.
The time for that is over. And, I've always really appreciated that you did that. You've brought it up a few times, and I've always appreciated that greatly. I would have thought that the topic was too taboo, but my experience, just based off watching my own personal platform grow, despite being very throttled and everything on Twitter, because they want to silence my voice. My experience is that folks have been dying for this information. They're hungry for it. They want to know it. And also, not for nothing, the New York Times reporters didn't actually physically view any child sexual abuse material to do all their journalism, and they did an exquisite job. Gabriel Dance said that he only read about it. Now, reading about it is pretty rough. Even when I even just read about it, it can knock me off, like, pretty bad, because the stories are, it's just, you can't, it's incomprehensible for someone to process that evil is that capable of existing on the same planet where so much beauty exists at the same time.
Well, here's the question that I've gotten, and I don't have an answer at all, and I want to hear your thoughts, which is, okay, sure, like, there's a campaign and this stuff gets eradicated completely in the States and all the kids are safe, and that's something we would, of course, all want. But that, given the internet, all that's going to happen is there's going to be some poor country, and the money's going to be too good and now there's a market, and now the kids in these other countries, are the one, like, for example, Romania, as my understanding, is like the webcam capital of the world. Now, these are consenting adults and they're in front of a webcam, and that's nothing even remotely close to children being assaulted on camera and that being sold. But it's the kind of thing, like, what can you do, given the internet, if you just stop in America, just a click is a click, it doesn't really matter where it's originating. Are there like countries where this is more, there must be countries where this is more prevalent and more accepted than it is in the States?
I mean, the United States is the biggest consumer, but
is that true?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh my God.
Yes. Okay. A big part of human trafficking too is like sex tourism, where Americans will take trips to impoverished areas and buy children. So just temporarily. Yes, for instance.
By the way, I have to interrupt you. Like, I really want this to be clear to people. When you say children, you don't mean like 16, you mean literal children. Like, this is something I think people do not wrap their heads around. When we talk children, we're not talking about gray areas. We're not talking about, like, someone who's a loli or, dressing like manga. We're talking about literal children.
I mean, yeah, like, actually, like like very, very young, 3 years old. I mean, the 13-year-old boys, but even then, I mean, I could look at a 13-year-old boy and know it was a 13-year-old boy, but let's say in Twitter's case, like, maybe they couldn't. The young men were, let's say, like, they were really, looked old for their age. They still provided government ID that showed that they were minors at the time of the report. So, yeah, I mean, I think the problem is, and this is one of my main beefs, is that human trafficking as a whole, the term is too broad. it's too broad. There's so many moving parts in human trafficking. In this particular instance, my main thing is the very, very young kids being sexually exploited on our social media platforms. And when I say young kids, I'm talking below prepubescent.
How does this, how does this even happen? Like if someone, it's got to be a family member or something, right? They're being filmed against their will. Does that person just create a website and then people just get paid that way? Like, I don't even understand the economics here, let alone the depravity.
Some of it is for free.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay.
There's so much. It's not, so they do mega links. That's why whenever they bust a pedophile, it's usually like 15,000, 20,000 child sexual abuse material. Does that make sense? It's never just like, oh, we found one picture of child porn. It's usually like 30,000 images. That's because they exchange mega links. In some cases, the pedophiles will pay, but they don't even need to pay anymore. It's kind of like watching porn at this point with the accessibility. I think that's what I keep trying to get folks to realize. In Twitter's specific case, so if we take it back to Twitter, you can go to specific hashtags and right there, it'll pull up mega links and the mega links will have 15,000 plus images.
What's the mega link for us boomers?
I was a boomer too. I only found out about this because I was trafficked on Twitter. If I hadn't been trafficked on Twitter, I would never even know this either. A mega link is a mega link, a big link of child porn.
What do you mean? Like it's a long URL? I don't understand what that term means.
It means you click on it and inside the file, there's a lot of child porn.
Oh, so it's like a zip or a RAR file. So it's like basically you're downloading a database of just thousands of images.
It'd be like if you said, hey, Eliza, here's my cookbook, or here's my cookbook was probably a bad example, but like, here's my list of recipes or something. And I click on it and it's like a bunch of recipes.
Holy crap. Okay. And just with
on Twitter.
With one click of a button, you're getting literally tens of thousands of images.
And you don't even need to have a Twitter account to access this material.
So right. Yeah. Because Twitter, people complain when I block them on Twitter and I say you could just have an private browser and just go to the URL directly and see it. So someone could just go to a library or on their phone, open. I feel gross even discussing the process because when you have information out there, it's just like, am I guilty now of giving nefarious people information about how to access things that they shouldn't have access to? Like that's another issue here.
I mean, I'm not giving out the hashtags or
I'm not asking you to, but I'm just saying it's like this is the kind of thing where when you like how when you discuss certain issues.
Trust me, I think about this all the time.
It's like
there are a lot of things I don't say, by the way. There's a lot of things I don't say on purpose because I don't want to I don't know really the best way to navigate it, but a lot of people do have questions because it's kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, I never see it, so it must not happen. And I found that giving folks just the data and statistics doesn't really click with them. When I share particular survivor stories, specific survivor stories, that seems to resonate a bit more. To me, the numbers speak, but to the average person, it doesn't seem to quite click.
Well, so can you tell me one of those stories that people find moving? Because I agree with them. I think narratives are a lot easier for people to understand and to certainly sympathize with than just like saying there's a lot of images somewhere. I mean, we don't even know what it's all. Most people don't know what these images would look like, and they don't want to start thinking about it.
You don't want to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Depending on my particular mental state at the time, when I witness child sexual abuse material, it will knock me out for 3 days.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
I mean, it will really jack me up. So you don't want to see it, especially if you're a survivor, because if you're a survivor, it can really trigger. You want to talk about one of my other complaints with Twitter is that not only are the children being sexually exploited, but then when other survivors come across this child sexual abuse material, then they're exposed and then they're re-triggered, which could kick off thoughts of suicide, self-harm. I mean, you name it. It brings them back to when they were exploited. And it's just all bad. But I think one of the most powerful stories that I've heard more recently also came from the New York Times. It's a survivor from Illinois named Adrienne, and she was trafficked and as part of child sexual abuse material, and she had to ask Twitter for 6 years to pull these naked videos of her down. And it took Nicholas Kristof from the New York Times calling Twitter or contacting them. I'm not sure how he contacted them. But this is in a piece by Nicholas Kristof. I think it's called "Why Do We Let Corporations Profit Off of Rape?"
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so she'd been asking for 6 years. So that's why I'm very grateful that there's no nude images or videos of me on Twitter, because I'm like, I don't even think they'd take it down.
Hey guys, today's episode is brought to you by Sheath Underwear. They make the most comfortable boxer briefs I've ever worn. If you go to Sheath Underwear, SHEATH underwear.com, use promo code Malice20, you get 20% off your order. I wear it every day. What makes Sheath special is they have this dual pouch technology for both of your man parts, prevents them from sticking together. It sounds weird. Then you try them on, you're like, oh, I get why Malice keeps talking about this. It stays cool in the summer or while working out. They're super soft. They're stretchy. You don't get damp. They have this moisture wicking material that they use. And they have brand new materials like bamboo and mesh for even more cooling comfort. They're independent creators and they're innovators. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice20, you get 20% off your order and you get to support the underwear that supports you. It's the real deal, and that's the tea. Let's get back to the show.
So, given that you know many survivors and have talked to them about this, when I went on Rogan and talked about my friend Matt, 4 other of my friends secretly reached out to me and said they'd also been the victims of childhood sexual abuse. And by the way, I just also really want to make clear, because I think our minds try to downplay these things. When I'm saying childhood sexual abuse, I'm not saying someone put their hand on their thigh. I'm talking about things that are completely crossing the line. This is not ambiguous stuff. People need to understand just how bad we're talking about. I'm not going to get graphic, but this is not, someone flirting or, buying a kid a candy bar. This is full-blown assault on a minor child. How do survivors kind of become whole, and what techniques do they have to be able to pass in society? Because I know for a fact there's going to be people listening to this who this is going to resonate with, and they have spent many years being scared to say something to anybody, understandably.
Yeah. First and foremost, I want any survivors listening to know that if you live within the United States, you can reach out to the sexual assault or human trafficking hotline, even the domestic violence hotline. If you've experienced past or recent trauma, so it could be past or recent, you can reach out to the hotline 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, even on holidays. It's LGBTQ plus friendly, and you'll speak directly to an advocate. They will assess your needs, make sure that you're safe. And then even for a past trauma can help guide you into finding an advocate in your area where you can receive the healing that you deserve for that particular situation. Because the truth is, if you were assaulted, it is really not your fault. So you do deserve healing. And that is something in the United States that we do offer, that long-term aftercare for survivors, regardless of when the assault happened. So that's good. And you can receive it. It's completely free. And if you reach out to the hotline, you can also reach out and it's confidential. So that's good. So that's the first thing, is that if you're, if you're struggling, because I find a lot of survivors struggle with thoughts of suicide, self-harm, especially like even just listening to a podcast like this, it can trigger, it can be wild, it can be smells, it can be a song, it can be anything. So I always encourage survivors to reach out and to be honest with someone. And the cool thing about the hotlines is you can do it completely anonymously, and you could say some wild stuff and they're not going to judge you, because trust me, they've heard it all. So that's the first thing.
Can I say one more thing? I think it's important for people who are victims of trauma to realize that just because someone had it worse than you doesn't mean you're fine. You know, they would be like, well, I wasn't raped as a baby, so whatever, I was 12. You are entitled to your trauma. And if this is something that's been disturbing you for a long period of time, you don't have to put a label on it, but you can get better than you are now. And you know, and a lot of it is also your brain digging in its heels and not wanting to accept what happened in the past. And that's very understandable. It's, you know, the brain wants to protect itself. But like, again, just because someone has it worse doesn't mean that everything that happened to you was fine.
100%. Yeah, it's not, I try not to compare because that could get really, you know, what's funny now that you say that, Malice, that is one of the reasons it took me so long to reach out for help. When I left my abusers, I thought, because I didn't have ropes around my wrist, because I didn't have chains on, because I never had duct tape on my mouth. You know, I still had a cell phone the whole time I was being trafficked. So I thought because I wasn't trafficked in the back of a semi truck that I wasn't trafficked. You know, I didn't realize what human trafficking really was. So I'm grateful that I didn't let it go on longer than it did, because in retrospect, I definitely could be dead. But I was comparing to what I thought human trafficking was. I wasn't reaching out for help, and I was legit this close to death, like so many times. And so please, if you're experiencing trauma, reach out to someone. And if you're not 100% sure whether or not it's trafficking, call the hotline. That's what they're there for. So yeah, don't.
Here, I mean, this is something there's so much, it's like so many landmines in a sense to discuss this issue. But here's one that I would very much like your opinion on. How do you date someone who has had this in the past? Like, how do you, I think a lot of guys are so, you know, there's a lot of evil, but there's a lot of good, right? And if you're dating someone and you realize that they have been the victims of this in the past, you don't want to be the guy who's bringing up all this, you know, emotional baggage. But at the same time, you want to kind of make a move to be a little bit, you know, coarse about it. But it's this kind of weird situation. Like, how would you advise someone who is, you know, interacting with someone knowing this is their past? How do you do it?
It's a really good question too. You know, the first thing is if somebody discloses, and this could be a friend, family member, anyone, right? Doesn't necessarily end. Men are survivors as well.
Of course,
this could go for anyone. In fact, I've dated people that have disclosed that they're survivors. So you kind of go back to the basics. I believe you. And then you ask if there's anything that you can do to help. And if they're not ready to proceed, you know, one thing, just generally speaking, a lot of survivors don't want to be asked their story.
Sure.
When most survivors retell their story, myself included, it's not fun. It's like pretty much the worst. So a lot of people don't want to tell their story. But if you just say, I believe you, how can I support you? And then also, just as I would tell anyone, if you have friend, family member, coworker, you know, anybody, just have some resources available so that if they reach out, you know, if they're struggling, if somebody's crying and says, you know, I was sexually assaulted as a child, I just watched this podcast, I'm triggered, whatever happens, you have the hotline number ready for them. Say, hey, you know, you could call this and speak directly to an advocate, no strings attached, no, it's free. And if they want to disclose, you can be there for them and show them love and proceed with caution, you know, especially when it comes to sexual assault or human trafficking, you know, not taking advantage of them, not disrespecting them. But this is like general life stuff, right? Like,
but it's not, because I think most people, because this is something that's so poorly discussed, most guys are going to often be on eggshells around women anyway, just in some context. And when you hear this and the guy's thinking, if I say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, I'm going to make her into like a complete basket case through no fault of my own. Like, there's this, you know, element of paralysis that involves, and now the girl or the partner, the male partner.
I'm still single, Malice. Are you telling me why I'm still single? I hate everything.
Oh no, No,
I'm
Eliza,
sitting here
Eliza,
like,
we have a list of why you're still single. All right, here we go.
listen,
It's 1 through 247. We did it. We went on
Listen.
locals. Why is Eliza still single? This was quite a family feud. So it was bad taste in music. I don't know who put that one on there. That's on here.
I hate you.
Mismatched shoes. I don't know what that.
I do not.
It's
Wait,
on the list. Don't question the list. No. So okay, great stuff, Alyssa. That cowboy hat's on here. It's 193, and the bandana is number 17. But in all seriousness, it's the kind of thing where I think guys don't know how to.
Yeah, I don't think. Listen, I mean, this is like any type of trauma, right? I mean, the way I look at it is, it is 2021. Everybody's got something.
Sure.
Everybody's got something. And I think that because we know so many people are survivors of sexual assault out here, I think it behooves of us to just proceed with caution, believe survivors, offer assistance when they need it. And I don't know. I don't know, because I mean, to me, it is my real life. It's normal. You know, to you, you have your own trauma, Malice. Like, I mean, I'm not saying like in that, like you have
Sure.
that much trauma, but everybody's has something. A lot of people were bullied in school. I mean, I was homeschooled, so they didn't have a chance to bully me for my antics. But you know, I don't know. I guess I don't think about it. Those are good questions. To me, it is my normal. So I think if I reached out to someone, because I go through a lot of times when I was struggling, you know, I was like super struggling last week, like super duper struggling with everything. I needed someone to be there for me. Now, I'm not dating Eric July. This is just the person that ended up being there for me. He sat down, he talked to me, he helped me unpack what was going on. We're not dating, but like just as a person, you know, I have other friends a lot from your community that really sit down and help me unpack those things. So they're not helping me as a survivor necessarily. They're just, they're helping me as a friend. How would you help a friend? How would you be there for a friend? Does that make any sense? Or am I doing? Of course.
I think it also, what I'm reading between the lines is, in those situations, you should follow the victim's lead.
100%.
Yeah, and just kind of be like, okay, like I can't drive this car, and it's okay that I can't drive this car. I have to be deferential and be respectful. And it's not as much of a sacrifice as it sounds at first, because the survivor, you know, I'm sure is not trying to, I'm sure that happens at first, but after a while, you're not perceiving every potential partner as a shadow of your former assailant.
I mean, I can't speak for all survivors either. What works for me might not work for everybody else. But I'm just laughing because my love life is so completely tragic. But I'm picky too, so it's still a little different. But when we work as advocates, when we serve survivors as advocates, we use a survivor-led approach, and that's exactly what you just nailed on the head. So I use a survivor-led approach where we meet survivors where they're at, and then I also use an approach I kind of like made up on my own. I call it green light, yellow light, red light. When a survivor's ready to go and zoom ahead with their healing, they let me know it's green light. When it's a time to pause, they give me a yellow light. And when it's stop, we stop. So, you know, if, let's say like hypothetically, like you and I were dating, if you said, hey, do you want to talk about it? Or if I said, hey, I'm struggling because I'm triggered because of Twitter stuff, you know, if you said, do you want to talk about it? If I say, no, I really don't want to talk about it, then you take my lead. I say, no problem.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. What do people do that is wrong when they have friends who come out to them? Because there must be, like, here's an example. Like when my mentor died on my birthday in 2010, a lot of people, given my personality, like started cracking jokes. And like, I get where they were coming from, but it was really not what I needed to hear that day. And it kind of really was salt in the wound. Although,
like on Twitter or in?
No, like texts, emails, you know, like but again, they're trying to anticipate what I want. And it was really not at all what I wanted. It was horrible. And again, I don't really blame them. I mean, they were not coming at it from a malevolent place. But so I would ask you is, what is it that I'm sure there's certain things that survivors complain about where they come out and they're just either not misunderstood or they're not being told what is most useful, and what mistakes can people avoid doing, right?
There's so many nails on a chalkboard of stuff.
There you go. That's the one. Yeah, that's the word I mean.
Yeah,
Nails on
there's like
chalkboard.
so many nails on a chalkboard when it comes to being a survivor. First and foremost, people don't believe survivors. I know it sounds cliche. I know it sounds corny, but there's nothing worse than getting ready to tell the worst parts of your life imaginable and not being believed. It is not easy. I'm not going to say that people haven't lied. I know somebody's going to be in the comments like, oh, some people lie. Yeah. I also believe in due process. So, definitely but I think we need to believe survivors. We're talking about friend level right now. So
Yeah, exactly.
There's like friend level stuff. So, and then asking details. Asking details, you can say, you could say something along the lines like, I believe you if you feel comfortable telling your story, or if at any point you decide to tell me your story, I'm here and ready to listen. Also, we have to be very mindful of our reactions when people tell us these things. Like, if I told you something grotesque from my past that might change your mind about how you view me, if you're like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to really process, like, okay, this person is telling you the worst parts of their life. It's kind of just best to just sit there quietly and be chill if they're giving you details. Now, if an assault has just happened, so we're talking like fresh off an assault, it is important to offer the survivor to take them to emergency room, because time is of the essence when it comes to a sexual assault crime, or child sexual abuse. Same thing. If your child discloses that they've been abused, please take them to an emergency room. If that is what the survivor wants. Sometimes the survivors don't want to go to an emergency room to collect evidence. But if it just happened and if the survivor hasn't showered, that's something you should probably do right away. But in general, just asking those gory details, because what it could do is trigger their mind back to a point where they're back at the assault in their head.
Today, we're welcoming back Ipvanish Vpn to the show. Ipvanish has been a longtime sponsor of ours, so it's great to have them back. If you care about the security of your online activity, the easiest way to protect yourself is with Ipvanish VPN. It's rated 4 out of 5 stars in Trustpilot. Ipvanish provides an encrypted connection for all of your internet traffic. And here's the thing. If you go to ipvanish.com/welcome, all lowercase, that's ipvanish.com/welcome, you get 50% off monthly and annual subscriptions. So it helps to prevent websites, Wi-Fi providers, and even hackers from intercepting your data. You keep your financial details, personal information, and online activity safe from threats with Ipvanish. All you have to do is go to ipvanish.com/welcome. You get 50% off monthly and annual subscriptions. That's not too shabby. Let's get back to the show.
This was a concern for my friend about kind of coming out, because he was very worried that his parents, who had nothing to do with it, were going to understandably feel an insane amount of guilt over what had been done to their child. So how do parents who learn that something like this happened to children of theirs, how do they deal with this? Like, I can't even begin to wrap my head around it.
Well, the first thing is it's not about them. It's not about you.
Okay.
When a survivor discloses, the first thing to remember is it's not about you. So that's number one. We have to solely focus on the survivor and what has happened. Now, parents can receive aftercare treatment on their own, and I would highly encourage that. But it isn't necessarily about them. See, it's kind of funny, actually, Malice. And this is kind of interesting. People always find this very interesting. I'm at my parents' house right now because they have the Wi-Fi on the farm. Long story. I live in a different house, but my dad came home early from work to mow, and I had to I'm trying to make sure he stays out of the house, because I keep this part of my life separate from my parents. We don't talk about it ever. It's a very sensitive topic. because I'm very close with my family. People trip out how much time I spend with my family, and we never talk about it. So just imagine, like, all through 2020, all this time, like all the stuff you see me have the ability to do, my parents don't know, because it's just it's something we don't talk about. So, I mean, you have to pick and choose who you talk to about being a survivor when, and the survivor will know when it is right to talk to that particular person.
But I mean, okay, so how do you, or just...
I didn't answer your question, did I?
No, you did. How do you and other people who have been abused like this, how do they ever redevelop a sense of trust in other humans, which we need to have to get through life?
Every survivor is different.
Okay.
I mean, it also depends, in my experience, it depends on the level of abuse, the age of abuse, how much violence, when it comes to human trafficking, especially in the United States, coercion plays a big role. So in my particular case, I had a trauma bond with my abusers. A lot of folks call it Stockholm syndrome. And that bond's really strong. So that's just, it's difficult it's difficult for anyone in 2021 to have trust, but especially for survivors. I will say this: survivors of human trafficking, usually out of a need to stay alive, have a good sense of intuition about who to trust and who to not trust. That's what I feel in my particular case.
I think there's something to be said that the fact that this sort of behavior is so beyond the pale for so many people. Like, we're not talking about, a guy and a girl got drunk, went back to his room, and, she had whatever, some things happened there where there's theoretically some kind of gray area. This is something that is, most people in their wildest dreams could never imagine doing this to a child, or knowing someone who does this to a child. So I think there must be some solace in knowing that, like, this is not how 99.9% of people would ever behave. And if they knew about this, they would just be beside themselves in all sorts of negative emotions.
Yeah, I mean, in my particular case, I was sold as a teenager. I mean, there was no real gray area. It was complete. That was the first time. So there really was no gray area there. It was completely exactly what it was. I think that people really don't in the past, or haven't wanted to think about this issue. And I also think the powers that be and folks that traffic have done a really good job at keeping it under wraps and sort of making it something that was completely taboo to talk about, something that people didn't want to talk about. I mean, it behooves of Twitter to have people like me not out here. Like, does that make sense?
Of course, yeah.
They want people like me not out here. They do not want people like me. Traffickers don't want people like me. Pedophiles don't want people like me out here. And the crazy thing is, we've let it continue and let them continuously silence or pay off people like me in the past, or the government gets involved, and then people can't say A, B, C, D, E, F, G because of grant funding. They don't want that. But I feel like the tide has changed after a prolonged period of time of folks talking about it. And I think that the real tipping point was the Epstein case, and now people are ready to talk about it.
I think in many ways it's similar to the gay rights movement, in the sense that, like, it's one thing to argue for it, but when you know someone who's like your neighbor or your uncle or someone you work with, it becomes a lot harder to be homophobic, because then there's a face with the concept. And if you know someone who has been the victim, instead of it being some abstract thing, it becomes real. And then it's like, wait a minute, this is not something I can sweep under the rug. And this is not something that's that uncommon. And suddenly people feel this impetus to, at the very least, have an enormous amount of sympathy for people who've gone through this, and realize it's far more common than we would like to ever imagine.
Yeah, and that's been my experience. I think one thing that I found really shocking is how well I've been embraced. I didn't realize that people were dying to know a survivor and to hear a little bit more, not just on like the gore porn aspect of it, but really and I think people love it, actually, because I think when folks get to know me, they follow me on Twitter, on Locals, it's like, Oh, Eliza's pretty. I mean, I'm normal. Like, like I listen to music and have cats.
What?
Needless to say, I'm normal-ish. I mean, I bought your book, so I can't be that normal.
That's correct. I'm no Barack Obama.
I'm dead. You said get on my level. I'm dead.
I did.
You said Obama, get on my level.
What was he at? Like number 9? I'm at number 3.
Oh, are we ready to talk about the book now? Are you going to let me be a fan for a second?
Sure, we could talk about the book. What do you want to talk about?
I'm still freaking out that you asked me the dating questions. Like, I'm literally the last person to ask about dating questions, but maybe you're right. Maybe I should explore that more. By the way,
No, I'll tell you why. Let me interrupt you and I'll tell you exactly why. Because if I'm with a girl and she has been the victim, I don't want, I'm like, if I like pull her hair a little bit, am I going to start a series of dominoes that's really going to traumatize her? And I don't want her. At the same time, part of my brain is like, maybe she doesn't want you to treat her like a wounded bird and wants you to treat her the same as everybody else. So there is that moment of paralysis. At the same time, it's also not sexy at all to be like, can I pull your hair, please? So it's this weird situation where you want the survivor to have as normal of a human experience as possible. At the same time, you don't want to just see them as this one aspect of their personality that like all you are from A to Z is a victim.
I think having an open and honest conversation, the fact that you're even thinking about it is probably already a good thing. And then you ask what their boundaries are. And if they don't give you any, and I think saying it just how you just did was perfect. There have been interviews. See, you and I have, I wouldn't say like rapport, but you kind of know me a little bit more than most of folks that interview me at this point. A lot of times before my interviews, I'm like, because I don't expect everybody to watch all my interviews, I tell them like, hey, you don't have to wear kitten gloves around me. You know what I mean? Like we could joke, we can have fun. Like I laugh a lot.
Wait, hold on. What are kitten gloves?
It's an expression.
No, it's kid gloves. Do you know where that comes from?
Whatever, Malice.
It's
whatever,
kid.
Malice, I didn't graduate high school.
Okay. Do you think there are gloves made out of kittens or are they gloves for kittens?
I thought they were gloves for kittens.
No, kid gloves are gloves.
Whatever, Malice, listen.
You should know this. It's important.
Okay.
Kid gloves are gloves made out of baby goats.
Ew.
Yeah, so if you're using that expression in this context, you should realize what you're saying. It's made out of the skin of dead goat children.
Ew.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Maybe not so much use that one. Anyway, regardless, I tell the interviewers that, you don't have to be like, as I always say, like, I'm not precious. Like we could, talk. We could really talk about it. Cause I don't know. It makes me feel weird when interviewers are like super weird.
But that's the whole thing. They don't have the framework to have any understanding of this at all. And I think corporate America their role is to make everyone like eyes glazed over, Brave New World, and think everything's fine. Your kids are safe.
No.
None of this. And it's a lie. But I think most people desperately want to live in a world where the Big Bang Theory is the edgiest thing out there.
No, they are coming for your kids. And the cathedral does not want you to know. And honestly, there will be more like me. One of my goals is to get more Elizas out there. There are more survivors. There are a ton of survivors out there, by the way. I'm not the only voice. But I feel like I tapped into something very specific. And I want to tell other people how I did, like show other survivors how I did that so that they can do that as well. People are dying for this information because they're terrified that their kids, something's going to happen to their children. They should be terrified. I'm telling you right now, if you're a parent out there, if you're watching, you should be terrified that your child is going to speak to a predator on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or well, not a lot of young people use Twitter, but you only have to be 13 to have an account. So, your predators know how to talk to your children, and they will talk to as many children as they can till they can find that right victim, and they will get your children. And the other thing I always try to instill too is that your child doesn't even need to leave the protection of their own room to get trafficked. A predator will have your 10-year-old girls sending them nudes on Snapchat, and before you know it, oh, this is the truth. Look, this is the truth.
I'm not saying it's not the truth. I'm just saying uh, it's very disturbing to hear this from you and have this independently validated by other people. And also that sense of complete powerlessness, which I think most people have, especially being an uncle now. You have two
Yeah.
young nephews, and just seeing them in my sister's house and knowing for 100% of a fact that there are people out there who want to do really bad things to them, and that those people would know to go to where the kids are. It's not like, you know what I mean? And the
They're
fact that,
experts at it.
yeah, I
They
mean,
are experts at it. Like legitimately, they are experts. And the thing is, people have been complaining about this issue with the internet situation since the freaking 90s.
oh,
Like,
I'll give you evidence of this. And this is something that made me livid. When my sister was a kid, she's a lot younger than me. AOL used to have ads that, thanks to parental controls, we keep your kids safe. And my sister would get these emails like, take this pill and make your boner bigger or whatever. And she get the whatever, all the pornographic emails that we all used to get to some extent before the spam filters got better. And my mom like called up AOL and yelled at them like, blah blah blah, I have parental controls, what's going on here? And part of me was like, okay, mom, you really think AOL is going to do anything? And then part of me is like, you know what? They're running ads that are telling her that they're doing something about it. So I don't blame her for taking these ads from AOL at face value. There is the belief and the claim, I'm sure explicitly, by every one of these corporations you named, that we're doing everything in our power to make sure this doesn't happen. We have zero tolerance. And yet the evidence is to the contrary.
the evidence is to the contrary. It's not underreported. All these numbers are public. Everything I talk about is public. And this is something, we cannot wait for the government to take care of it. We cannot wait for law enforcement to take care of it. A lot of times those entities are involved. We cannot wait for organizations to take care of it. They are grant funded by the government. So you have to take care of it. You have to educate your children. You have to do your due diligence, educate your children. You and I are, I'm an aunt to your, an uncle. In my particular case, both my nephew and niece are special needs. So that will look a little different for them. But, and they're actually more vulnerable because they're nonverbal. So that's the other thing too. If you have kids that are on the spectrum or that are nonverbal or have a disability in any other way, they are more vulnerable to being sexually abused.
It gets even worse. I mean, no matter how many layers you tell me of this, it's just like there's another trap door that I couldn't even think of.
They wouldn't be able to tell me what was happening. That's why they're more vulnerable.
There was this book called Our Guys, which Amy Sedaris talked about. It was basically a bunch of kids, I think in Jersey, and they got this like special needs girl to basically like, engage in sexual activity. I think they raped her with like a broom or whatever, and they thought it was like absolutely hilarious. And there was a whole campaign like to have them not have consequences because these were like high school or college jocks. That's a whole other angle that is, would bear exploration. But yeah, it's like, if
there's been live streams on Facebook of children being sexually assaulted. This is normal.
Oh my God.
Zoom, the pedophiles do live shows where there's one case specifically that will really, make you, I don't even want to go into details because it's not worth it, but it's pretty much the most horrific thing. There's only a couple worse stories I've ever heard. And the Zoom one was really one that stands out.
Let me ask you a basic tech question, because this just seems so obvious to me. I don't understand the answer. There's a site, and the site has all this stuff, right? I'm Pete Townsend. I hope I'm getting the name right and not just slandering someone.
Who are you calling a pedo that we don't know if they're a pedo?
Yeah, it's Pete Townsend. Looking at the computer, why doesn't the FBI or CIA look at the IP address of everyone who looked at this page and just go to their house?
There's too much. That's that. The long story short is there's too much. The other long story short is there's too much. They are overwhelmed. They are underfunded. And do we really trust the FBI anyway? Now, that being said, the FBI has done some really amazing things, but the truth is they are underfunded and overworked, and it's a whole hot mess. And actually, secretly, I would like to pick your brain, not necessarily today, but just on how because I feel like you and I would probably align, and I would love to hear how you with anarchism would handle this issue. Because I've talked to anarchists before.
Oh, but you handle with guns.
That's what I would hope you would say.
Of course, this isn't even a question. There's no. Trump had a tweet years ago about how there's absolutely no cure for this, and I mean, there's a big argument about how pedophiles, yeah, people are arguing this is a sexual orientation, and you could call it whatever label you want, but if you are interacting with someone who's of age just because you think it's okay in your brain, I don't care what your motivation is. This is not something we're going to have. And I don't care if it's incurable, and I don't care if there's some compulsion that you were born with. None of these things are irrelevant to me. I think to most people, when we're dealing with things that are completely beyond the pale. Again, this is not, she's 18, you're 20, you get her drunk and you're in college, which I do not think is acceptable.
We're talking about human rights violations.
Exactly. Yeah.
Against children.
Right.
Human rights violations against children. I mean, I could almost see a good debate in some ways for, I've seen some good debates, but we are talking about very young children, people that are attracted to prepubescent. There's an entire label for folks that are attracted to children that are not able to speak yet.
What?
So, yes, there's an entire label. So, like, I could see a good argument for, like, he's 18, she said, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, sure. That's whatever. I'm not going to say it's whatever, but it's, there's certain, especially in cultures and throughout history. I mean, really, if you look at the woman's body, we're really, so I could see good arguments there, but we're talking about people that are attracted to very, very young children. And watch Malice. I'm telling you right now, they're going to try to shift the goalposts. They're going to try to shift the bar. In my lifetime, there will be a push to legalize pedophilia, to legalize child sexual abuse material, to legalize all this stuff. I put out a tweet the other day. The government is going to fumble the ball so horribly with human trafficking that in my lifetime, they will try to legalize it. I guarantee you. This is how bad. So that's why I'm urging people out here, like, do not wait for the government to handle this. Now, wait, let me back up. I do not condone vigilante behavior. I'm not saying vigilante behavior. But I'm saying we need to educate. When I say don't wait for the government to do it, don't wait for the government to educate your kids. Don't wait for the government to be watching your kids' social media. Don't wait for law enforcement. See, everybody thinks, law enforcement, the FBI is just watching social media looking for pedos. No, they're not at scale. Not at scale. And they won't be able to, ever. So you have to watch your own kids' social media.
A friend of mine had a kid not that long ago. And one of the things, and they're good, like Ned Flanders types. But the wife knew when she was interviewing nannies, she's like, this is an uncomfortable question, but have you ever suspected someone being the victim of abuse? And if that's the case, what did you do about it? And that made her feel good when the woman said there was once and I did report, because now they are like, okay, this is something that they take seriously. And when you're talking about children, it's better safe than sorry. You don't have to be a paranoid helicopter parent, but this is something that's so egregious and something that's so much more common than we'd like to think, that there's only so much due diligence you could do, but it's incumbent on you to have those uncomfortable conversations, because
you should be a helicopter parent. I'm sorry. This is 2021. It's not like when you and I were growing up, Malice. This is now the scope has changed. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The scope has changed. Now you have to be basically a psycho when you watch where your kids are going online, what social media they have, what alternative messaging apps they have, because the problem is these predators and it's like this, Mouse. This is the way I always tell parents is like, think about when you and I were younger. Like, didn't you want to leave home at like 13, 14, like go be cool? Like,
well, that's pretty cool at home, but yeah.
Well, I'm still, yeah, I mean, we're cool, but But I mean, so there's that rebellious age where you just want to leave home. The difference between that and when you and I were growing up and now is now young people get on there or whatever platform they're using. It could be TikTok, it could be Twitch, whatever they're using, or whatever new social media. That's the other thing too, because there's always new social medias that come out. And they'll be talking about that stuff online. A predator will know how to find that and then offer your kid, oh, come down to Florida. I'll get you a flight. And it happens quickly. They wait for them to to start to disclose some of those vulnerabilities, like, oh, I hate my parents, my mom won't let me dye my hair green, blah, blah, blah. And before you know it, it's gone. Or they'll dupe them into some type of relationship, making them think that they're going to get away from their family. And actually what they'll do is just exploit them for photos or videos and put it online. I'm telling you, you should be a psycho. I don't know how many times I can say this. You should be kind of a psycho when you're taking care of your kids and nephews and niece and anybody else that's around.
Okay.
Sorry.
We're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
I can't even talk about your book.
No, there's no we here.
Can I talk about your book?
You have the floor.
Can I talk about your locals community?
You can talk about whatever you want.
Well, now that you're famous, you seem to not have time to talk about things.
I'm talking to you, aren't I? You went long today.
That's what. Never mind. First and foremost, Malice has a locals community. Are you going to talk about locals? Because I'll talk about locals.
You could talk about whatever you want.
Okay. Well, I'm going to do a pitch for your locals community. So I love Malice's locals community. It is probably by far my favorite place on the internet. Thank you for having that community. It's my favorite thing ever.
Zero child porn.
Oh my gosh. You don't even know. So the good news is there are some social media platforms that have no child sexual abuse material. Minds.com and locals.com, zero. And they have great reporting system. Locals, I'm trying to have them get a little bit of a better reporting system. But yeah, there's zero child sexual abuse material allowed on Locals and Minds. But they don't say just allowed, like they actually do remove it. So that's great. But Malice Locals community is my favorite place on the internet. And I've met how many people in real life from your Locals community? 3 people from your Locals community in real life during a global pandemic. What's that sound?
It's the Locals police.
Woo, woo, woo. Did you see I got my Locals club? Like what a cornball.
I saw, yeah.
And we hang out in there. And the reason why I love it so much is because my life is loud. Like my life is really loud and it's really intense and there's a lot going on. But like when I go into your community, it's so supportive, David. And actually, you know what? Shout out to your community as a whole, because I don't think you realize this, but your community has supported me relentlessly.
Good.
Like, yeah, it's like your community has continuously supported me, and it always brings it to
that's because I make it a point to alienate people who are toxic and useless. So if you're not bringing something to the table, what the hell good are you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that too. But in the community, we've only had a couple people that have been kind of wild.
Well, that's my point. It's that like my persona, for lack of a better term, online, it's very off-putting to certain type of personality, but that's by design because those people don't bring anything to the table. What is going on here?
Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
But you like Liza tried to wear costumes on my
What is
show.
this? It's a kind of Mad Hatter thing?
I don't know. It was just because it's such a it's from here up, so I couldn't do too much else visually.
Okay.
But yeah, no, the locals community by far, and shout out to your locals community. Like, thank you everybody for supporting me. I don't want to get emotional, but it means a lot. It means a lot. Sorry,
well, don't cry. I promise you I'll make Dave Smith cry next week.
It's tears of joy. Dave Smith's going to make me cry when he officially announces his bid for, look at this little piece of tissue.
Let's try this again.
What?
We're running out of time.
Okay. But what about your book?
What about it? Go ahead. What do you want to know?
How do you feel?
I have no ability to replicate what has happened, so it's very confusing. This does not port to any kind of data or systems processes that I know. There's no metric by which I should be competitive with Oprah. This is not a function of humility, it's just a fact. So if I am able, without a launch or without some big interview, to compete with her on any level, it's awesome, objectively awesome, but emotionally, it's completely alienating because I don't understand how this happened. And that's also a source of frustration because I know it's like, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. But at the same time, if you have like, after a while and there's 10 horses on your porch, you're like, where are these horses coming from? Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if it's been number 4 for a day now, and that chart updates hourly.
It got up to number 2 yesterday.
It didn't. Not on the main chart.
Okay. Maybe I'm tripping. Sorry.
Fine.
You know, I'm
It got up to number 3.
I'm a boomer.
Bronze, right? It was the top nonfiction book in America. There's no metric other than this that I'm in like the top 10. I don't have the top 10 biggest Twitter audience. I don't have the top 10 this or that. This isn't one of the top 10 subjects. Like, I get reasons why it would do well, but not better than Obama well. So I do not quite literally, I'm very, very grateful and I'm delighted. And I know there's a snowball effect because people, and I'm one of them, when you see someone making it happen on their own, you really want to chip in and be like, hell yeah, let's make this happen. I get it. And as far as I'm the recipient of that, it makes me ecstatic. But at the same time, and also it hasn't ended. You know what I mean? So it's
like it's just getting going.
Right. So it's one thing if it's like, hey, I had it, you know, like if someone has like a one-hit wonder. I was on Eric Weinstein's show and I was flipping out because I just really hate it when people make fun of one-hit wonders. It's like, wait, this person wrote a song that brought joy to like an entire country and that's all that they've accomplished in their lives. They're a hero, you know, like, so for you to condemn them. So I don't know how this happened. And it also makes me very, excited about The White Pill, the next book, because I tweeted this out also. This is there's a lot of people who I'm going to be giving testimony to, and now it's going to be really validating to know that their voices are going to be heard and that people are going to, you know, what little can be done to realize some very bad things have been done to some very good people, and New York Times and other agencies sat on their hands for a long time. And I'm the one who's going to pull back the curtain and be like, look what happened to, you know, entire nations of humans for decades. And no one seems to care or to actually say we should have that here. So that is a good prelude to that. But as far as the book's success, I have no, it's just completely almost foreign to my experience.
I mean, I think it's freaking amazing. The vibe is so high. Like watching you succeed independently, watching everybody talk about it. For first and foremost, your locals community has been going crazy. Like we've just all been living for it. Like just loving it, but then just the energy and the vibe. And honestly, I mean, this is just from me. Aesthetically, the book is pleasing to the eye. The cover is aesthetically pleasing. Then I think that the words, just the way, just the name of the book, plus something about you, and it was legitimately the perfect timing. Apparently, I think the timing was absolutely flawless, if you had to ask me. And I think that probably because of just the buzz and the interest that you have, and then just some of the interviews that you've done, plus the vibe with locals. For some reason, I feel like locals has created, and maybe you probably, of course, be able to speak to this differently than I would, because you're you, that it's created the sense of loyalty to you. There's this even more camaraderie. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but everyone on my locals, Barack Obama has 10,000 people who would literally die for him, right? So again, this doesn't explain the situation.
I mean, what I told a fellow locals community member yesterday was, I feel that it was just the perfect time.
Wait, that doesn't mean anything. What does that mean? Perfect time?
Malice, yes, it does. Because there are many survivors.
These are all old. These essays are decades old. So it's like it doesn't even make sense that it's the perfect time. They've been around. It's not like they just came into existence.
They needed a different messenger. They needed a different vehicle.
Well, apparently, but what I'm saying is I don't know that a month from now or a month earlier would have been a significant difference.
I definitely think it would have. It's the right timing for I'm sorry. Listen, you're having trouble processing it. I
didn't even have a launch date. So how Amazon works is you upload your book, and then you have to go back and forth with them and have 3 days in between each back and forth. And then one day they're like, okay, it's a go. So I know for the next book, I'm going to get it approved like a month out so that I can hit publish and have it be live on that date. But I just was in LA. I did a week of shows. I didn't even mention any of the shows because I had no idea if it was ever going to come out because they were giving me headaches because of public domain stuff, understandably. So I don't know. Anyway, we are definitely out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
When you asked me the dating question, because I didn't necessarily know how to answer.
You are welcome.
Hey guys, before we go, if you enjoy this podcast, you might enjoy some of the other podcasts available at gasdigitalnetwork.com. This week, we're highlighting High Society Radio with hosts Chris from Brooklyn, Chris Stanley, and Bronx Johnny. You can find the full catalog of episodes on demand at gasdigitalnetwork.com or catch the last 20 episodes anywhere you find podcasts. Here's a clip.
Johnny, also, I see this thing. It says here, your wife is not down with Cream Nation.
Yeah.
Now, is that the band Cream or Wu-Tang?
My spell check's not working for me. It failed me miserably. And then when I responded to that shit, I put in spell check. The word check didn't come in. So I'm thinking I'm getting early version Alzheimer's and shit.
Okay, so your wife's not into cremation?
Yeah.
What is happening in the Bronx right now? Is there a 4-alarm fire?
A lot of people died. I don't know if you've ever heard, but a lot of people get shot and stabbed around here, so I can't control that. Or there might be some fat person stuck in the elevator. I don't fucking know anymore.
Hey, don't fat shame, man.
Why don't you just put some more hoodies in front of the window?
I mean, if I could, I would, but I don't want to dirty them.
It'll muffle the sound.
Oh, man.
Okay, so your wife is not into cremation. I
want to get cremated, man.
Why? Like, what's the difference?
All right, no, so here's the shit. I feel like if you're in a coma, they say you have like some consciousness and shit, right? Like you can feel shit sometimes. I don't want to be in no fucking casket and hear fucking worms and fucking rats biting on the side of the coffin.
I mean, you'll be dead. You'll be dead.
Yeah, but you're still gonna be stuck there and shit, hearing stuff, and you're gonna get claustrophobic at some point. I can't get used to being in tight spaces like that, so.
All right, this is crazy talk. I actually have a friend who recently passed away. His wife wanted to have him cremated.
Yeah.
And he was Jewish, and our more Jewish friend was like, "No, you can't do that. It's a trap."
Jewish people don't do cremation. Is that not a thing for them?
Stop trying to pronounce it that way and gaslight me. It's pronounced cremation.
Cremation, right?
No, Johnny. It's Johnny. It's Cream Nation. That's how you say it. Cream Nation. Chris, it's Cream Nation.
All right.
There you go.
Like, I hope I get cremated when I pass away.
I guess it's cremation then.
What are you saying, Chris? You're not saying cremated?
No, cremated sounds like something you do to a lady friend.
Yes, no, that's what happens. What's happened when you die and they burn your body. You get cremated.
You get cremated?
Yeah.
All right. Cremated. Okay. All right. That's all right. So my friend's wife wanted to cremate him because that was his wish.
Sure. Sure. When people pass, some people want to be cremated.
Yeah. He wanted to be cremated because he didn't want to come back as a zombie. It was a big fear of his.
That's understandable. Fair point.
And but his father, apparently Russians are super against cremation, and I guess Ecuadorians too.
My wife's OD Catholic. She's like, because we married and shit, we got to get buried together. Like, I'm like, we could save on the casket and shit, but I don't want to fucking, I want my own space and shit every once in a while. Like, I'll see you wherever the fuck we die. Like, it's fine.
The Catholic Church allows people to get cremated.
Yeah, man. Jesus got cremated, right?
No, I believe he was crucified, and then they didn't even bury that motherfucker.
They put him in a cave.
Yeah, they put him in a room, son.
What's a mausoleum?
They just put a rock in front of a hole. Like, it's like
that shit was mad lazy, son.
They were like, I thought this is your Lord and Savior. You guys can't pull out a shovel? Like, what are we doing?
Like the way they make that rock sound, it didn't sound like a very good rock. It sounded like he just tip it over and walk right out and then just put it back.
I mean,
like, that nigga left.
Oh,
it's like, what? I left that nigga here a couple hours ago. What do you mean?
That was a big ass rock. All the disciples had to push that shit over. There's 12 of them.
And to be fair, they were very hanging with Jesus, you wasn't eating the best meals. You were pretty malnourished if you were
What are you
fucking with
talking
Jesus
about?
back
It's
then.
fish and bread and wine. You're fucking
No,
living
dude,
it
it's
the
just
fuck
those
up.
little stupid wafers that were his own. He was like,
Yeah.
this is my body. I'm like, dude, I don't want to play Ookie Cookie again.
Yeah, I feel like that was like some sexual shit they put in the Bible and they try to man it up a little bit.
Hold
but
on,
I think he
hold
put
on.
his penis in their mouth, bro.
Bring up the Last Supper. Is there food on the table? I've never even noticed. What's on the
No,
table at
man.
the Last Supper?
I think it's just napkins and some
I think they're just
sporks.
getting drunk. I think the apostles were all drunk orexics.
They're like a shitty cipher.
Come on, guys. Let's see this fucking shit.
Yeah.
I know it might be hard to find
It's
the
the
Last
greatest
Supper.
I know,
picture
it's
of all
probably, yeah.
time, son.
All right. Oh wow, there really isn't shit on the fucking on the
Are
table,
those-
huh?
What are those nectarines?
Yeah, those
What
are
the fuck
all
is that?
empty plates.
Wow, you guys nailed it. These guys were eating dick.
I don't tell you right now, Jesus was a broke ass nigga, son. I
You know
know.
what?
Pious.
You're right.
I don't give a fuck what you call it. Broke is broke, son. They look like I just noticed too. Was it like a Christmas theme? That's why we do red and green. And like, what the fuck is going on with their gear, son?
Wow,
I'm saying
the
this is
fucking
trash.
The fucking Last Supper. I'm gonna go on a limb here. Last Supper sucked dick.
Yo, I didn't even know they had three. They had
Wow.
3 women in there. There's 3 women in that shit. Oh, they
No.
was fucking.
There's literally one woman in this picture, Johnny.
No, there's one next to that old dude, and then there's one behind the light skinned Jesus.
Isn't that
With
supposed to
the
be an
blue.
angel? Isn't that supposed to be an angel near the
Wait, I
guy? Near the guy who's looking at his buddies, going, "We didn't even have anything to eat. Why is it checked so much?" Isn't that supposed to be an Arab or something?
To be fair, the only dude with a halo knot on his head, I think, is Judas.
I would imagine.
That's fucked up, man. It was probably his crib too. They just showed up out of nowhere, like, yeah, I guess come in, Jesus. So this nigga stay doing that shit to me. I think Judas got the shit end of the stick on this one.
I mean,
Yeah.
There's not even like a cup of water, anything there. They dead broke, son.
yeah, that's why they had to eat of Jesus's body.
Yeah, that shit got weird. It's like, you want me to do what?
I'll give them this though. The venue was nice. I mean, that seemed like a nice fucking dinner hall. Just there was no food there.
Somebody should repaint the Last Supper as like Jesus laying on a table with sushi on his body and the apostles.
Oh, that'd be hot.
Yo,
And a
bet that-
VFW. Just
I
put him in
bet
a
that
VFW,
exists.
broke motherfucker.
I don't know. I bet it doesn't exist. Google it. Well, so Johnny,
Jesus-
your wife doesn't want you to get cremated.
Nah, son.
So
She wants that forever thing. I'm like, yo, I know I signed up for it, and I do love you.
no.
I don't want to get buried together.
Death till us part.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying though. Doesn't the contract end once we both die and shit, or at least one of us
Yes.
dies? I
Yeah,
would
one.
think so.
Literally one.
Like my family also got like a family tomb. I'm not with that shit neither. It's like, I don't like y'all niggas when I'm alive. Fuck, I want to be in the room with y'all when I'm dead.
Yeah, you gotta
'Cause
get dude. You gotta get cremated.
Hell yes. I want to put my body in like a little dime bag and give it to everybody, and they take me to their favorite places that we at and shit. And then they could smoke me or throw me in the fucking toilet to flush me down. That should be dope because you end up in the ocean and shit.
Or a waste treatment plant.
That's fine. They treat them shits good, son.
What? It's just shit to piss in the fucking
No,
giant
they
vat.
treat it though. It's waste treatment. They put like little. I seen it on Dirty Jobs. They shock it with like electricity and put mad Clorox patches in there. Shit is nice.
I don't think that's how it works, Johnny.